Well, I put it on pause to search James Caan's wives because this girl ended up marrying James Caan, but Sheila Ryan. So I recently read her book. It was a quick read, and I almost scanned over it because I've read it before. But I just wanted to be I wanted to remember some of the things that they did together. She was not on and off, but she was a pretty cool girl that he went out with. And fit her in. He would fit her in between other people. I think he was dating her while he was dating Linda. But I think she's the one that talked about it. When she went to Palm Springs one time with him, he was embarrassed by the guys, that all the things they were doing. So I'm sure that when he was with her, they didn't bring girls in, but I think that he probably, they would, all the guys would want girls, and he would, I'm going to have a swig of my American Dew, my Mountain Dew that they said is American Dew right now in the can. But they would bring girls in, so, and he would have, the fans would show up. They would know when he was there, and they would show up. There's one girl that I saw an interview. She's older, obviously now, but she was called one of the gate girls, and at his houses in Los Angeles, Hollywood, and Bel Air, and they would find out when he was in Palm Springs, and they would drive down, and some of them he got to know pretty well, and he would invite them in, and so she would talk about him being there, and sometimes the girls would go in and just, make sandwiches and eat, and he would preach to them. Said he would stand up on his table in the dining room, the what do you call those tables in front of your couch, and stand up and preach to them. Elvis, bless his heart, just wanting to preach, wanting to do what God wanted him to do, and it's like he wanted to preach, just like he told Lucy. She was ended up being teaching Sunday school, and he's like, I want to do that. He wanted to teach people about God. All right, let's get back to this. So she's trying to figure out what he's doing. In 1970, he could have gone to Palm Springs with the guys for a couple of days, but little Lisa Marie is 2 years old, so he probably went back to Hillcrest House or wherever they were. All right, be with his little girl. These desperate thoughts kept rolling and rolling over and over in my mind. I appeared cool, professional, and in control to all my friends and business associates, but inside I was a total disaster. I wanted to talk about him, and yet I couldn't talk about him. How could I explain the way I felt, how it had all been, how it had all happened? Words just couldn't express my feelings. Why didn't he call? And then, when I least expected it, the phone rang. It wasn't Elvis, but it was his bodyguard, Sonny West. Kathy, Elvis is in Palm Springs. What'd I say? He wants to send a plane for you. Can you come down for a few days? So he leaves Priscilla and the daughter, goes to Palm Springs with the guys. He's like, Priscilla, I got to take the guys to Palm Springs. So you stay here. It's not a place for girls and babies. So, we're just going to do guy things, and you just stay here, and I'll be back in a couple of days. And what does he do? He has Sonny call up Kathy and says, Kathy, will you meet me? This was no time to be coy. Love to. Great, what time? I'll meet you at the airport and drive you to the house. Get on the plane now. Tomorrow. Oh, no, not tomorrow. Tonight. As soon as possible. How long will it take you to get to the airport? Sonny said. Elvis wanted things now. Didn't want to wait. Tonight? Now? What's the nearest airport to your house? Ontario Airport, I replied, not believing that after all this time waiting, I would have to leave on a moment's notice. Great. Now write down these instructions. When you get to the airport, the pilot, Milo High, and then she puts in parentheses, what a name for a pilot. Milo High. We'll be looking for you near the terminal where the private planes come in. I hung up and let out a big Texas, Yahoo! And started getting ready. I wanted to do something with my hair. What could I wear? No time to buy anything new. Maybe I could pick up something in Palm Springs. I thought of the animals. Had to make certain they were taken care of. I should call my answering service and tell them I would be out of town. There was so much to do, but all I really wanted was to sit in a quiet place and think of all the things I would say to Elvis when I saw him again. Things that had been piling up inside of me that I couldn't say to anyone else. Palm Springs is a place for relaxation. Of course, fall and winter are the best seasons to visit. The wide variety of shops, restaurants, and nightclubs cater to every whim of the tourist, most of which are affluent and used to having only the best of everything. Frank Sinatra, Marilyn Monroe, Howard Hughes, Dean Martin, all those people, all those big stars. Thousands of stories have been written about Palm Springs, but nothing on paper can capture the feeling of complete peace and freedom one finds in this desert oasis. And that is what Elvis needed. Get away from Scylla, get away from being a daddy, as much as he loved Lisa. What he wanted to do was just get away, ride motorcycles, do boy things, listen to music out by the pool. Celebrities are everywhere, from politicians to writers to superstars like Elvis. It's one of the few, hold on, I gotta turn pages, places in the world where a famous personality can walk into a restaurant, a shop, or even take a stroll without causing a stir. Residents and tourists here are just used to seeing faces that are familiar to millions, and they usually leave them alone. People in Palm Springs seem too sophisticated to fawn over anyone, no matter who they are. This includes U.S. presidents, and many have been known to spend a lot of time there. Ronald Reagan, JFK, I don't know, I'm just throwing out names. I didn't know what to expect when I arrived at Elvis's house, but when I saw it, I was pleased. It was a low, one-story, white stucco Spanish-style home set on a slight incline, but the house sat low to the ground and had a black wrought iron fence, a red tiled roof, and was beautifully landscaped. Charlie Hodge told me Elvis had purchased it from the owners of McDonald's hamburger chain. Cool! Elvis was on the telephone, and it didn't take eavesdropping to figure out he was talking to Priscilla, and he sounded angry. I got the impression that she wanted him to come home to Los Angeles, and he was making excuses as to why he couldn't return home right away. So maybe he's been there a couple of days. He may have gone there straight after the tour and hadn't even been to Los Angeles yet. And she's like, when are you coming home? I mean, I kind of get it. I do get it. She has not been touring with him. She was at his opening in Las Vegas back in early August, and then for a week, and then she left. And then he finished up that tour, which was probably 2 to 3 more weeks in Las Vegas. And then they went on tour for a couple of weeks. So she's been at home in Los Angeles with the baby, and I'm sure a maid or a housekeeper and a babysitter, the nanny, all that kind of stuff. And she wants her husband home. I get that. But he doesn't want to go back to her. He wants to wind down with the guys and have a girlfriend flown in. He was making excuses as to why he couldn't return home right away, because he didn't bond with her. When he had hung up, he came over, hugged me, and then kissed me before he proclaimed, "Marriage is an outdated institution. It just doesn't work for most people and ought to be abolished." But I have a feeling she was whiny. Then his mood changed, and like an eager little boy, he took my hand and showed me around. Next to his bedroom was a private little patio with a water fountain, and the water was spurting out at an extremely fast rate. I told Elvis the fountain had high energy just like him, and he laughed. I didn't mention that the fountain looked as nervous as I felt. When we were on the road doing the show, everyone would be wrung down with fatigue, but Elvis kept going. He was always a bundle of energy and full of ideas. Now that he was resting between road tours, his vitality was astounding. He went from one activity to the next with complete enthusiasm. I think that energy is something God gave him because he was going to need it to do all these tours. Once again, God gave him what he needed to do what his purpose on earth was to do. Elvis had purchased some dune buggies, and of course, he bought enough for the bodyguards and for friends. Elvis never could seem to buy one of anything. One of the first things on our agenda that day was to pile in the dune buggies and drive into town. It was hilarious, bouncing around in that crazy black dune buggy, racing around with the others right behind us. It was like we were all teenagers again. We swam and lay around the pool and even went shopping. I had never been shopping with Elvis before because in any other town in America, we would have been mobbed or worse. Of course, we ended up in a jewelry store because jewelry, especially gold, was Elvis's favorite item to buy. At one time on tour, we even had a jewelry store owner from Memphis traveling with us, and he always carried a case full of precious stones and gold items. Later, I will go into that in greater detail. In Palm Springs, Elvis just shopped and looked and asked questions. I know he made several purchases, and he bought me a beautiful, intricate silver cross. I was thrilled, although I truly didn't like for Elvis to buy me gifts, which is also another story that I will go into later. Sounds a little like Lucy. I think that's one of the reasons he liked her so much. Not only did they bond, but she wasn't using him to get gifts. Darkness comes early in the desert, and the nights are pleasant and balmy. Sometimes a bit cool, but this first afternoon had been perfect. I swam in the pool while Elvis sunned, and when we sat out on the terrace alone, and talked. One thing, the house was big enough. Just a moment. The house was big enough for us to find privacy, which was certainly a treat. We were both enervated from the sun, the desert air, and all the activity and exercise. Later in bed, Elvis caressed me tenderly, kissed me, and held me close. I was still apprehensive, and he gently held me and stroked my hair, whispering that he would take care of his Minnie Mouse, which was a new name he had given me and one I still cherish. Minnie Mouse was the Walt Disney cartoon character and was, of course, tiny with a high voice. I was sensitive about my lack of height, which he teased me about constantly, but the name Minnie Mouse stuck, and coming from Elvis, it took on a tender, loving meaning. He gave nicknames to everybody, and she was Minnie Mouse because she was little and had a high voice. We slept late as usual and then went into the dining room for our usual big breakfast. The bodyguards and Charlie were there. Elvis was cheerful and full of jokes. But then he said, "Hey boys, you know what? Our Kathy is still a virgin." I could have died on the spot. Yeah, like, why? Oh my gosh, I would have been so embarrassed. I mean, it's a private choice. And goodness gracious, he didn't have the right to tell those people. I could have died on the spot. I know I turned several different colors, and I was angry. Did that mean he had been discussing my virginity with all these men? What had he said? What business was it of theirs? All of these thoughts kept running through my mind, but Elvis seemed oblivious to my anger and embarrassment. How could someone so sensitive and caring be such a clod? Before I made a scene in front of everybody, I left the table and stormed into the bedroom, undecided as to what to do next. Maybe I should just leave, catch a bus, a plane, even walk back to Los Angeles. These are the kind of thoughts I was having when Elvis walked into the room. "What's the matter, sweetheart?" "You telling everybody I'm a virgin. That's my business, not theirs, and you had no right to even discuss it. He looked at me with those eyes that always made me want to melt, and I thought I saw the beginning of a smile on his face. But when he took a good look at me, he decided that might be fatal. So he pulled me to him and held me close. Honey, I wasn't trying to shame you. I'm proud of your being a virgin. Not many girls could hold out this long. I admire the way you only want to have sex with someone you really love and feel passion for. Please understand, I wouldn't hurt your feelings for the world. Of course, I quickly forgave him. He didn't say he was sorry to very many people, especially in public around the guys. But back in a private room, he would with his girlfriends. He did with June multiple times. Pulled her into a bathroom and apologized. And here he apologized to Kathy in the bedroom. Of course, I quickly forgave him. I knew in my heart that Elvis would never hurt or harm me intentionally, and I wanted so much to believe that he was proud of me. I think this small tiff made me feel even closer to him, and I felt I understood him even better than ever before. He just said things occasionally without thinking. The next day, we sunned early, rode in the dune buggies, and came back for a swim in the pool before dinner. Elvis and I were relaxing side by side. He looked up into the sky and said, "See that cloud up there? It looks like the head of a poodle." I looked up, and there it was, a fleecy white cloud shaped like a poodle's head against the soft blue sky. "It does look like a poodle. Want me to make it disappear?" "Sure," I said, thinking it was some kind of joke. Elvis closed his eyes and remained still and silent for a short time, and then he looked up at the cloud, and it disappeared before my eyes. The poodle's head was no longer there. It was gone. "How did you do that? I can't believe it." And I couldn't. It was too mysterious for me to even imagine. "Well, it's just a form of meditation," he explained. "It's very simple." "It doesn't sound simple." "Yogis can do it. Certain groups of monks practice it. Indians knew how to control the weather. They sometimes did it with their rain dances. Christ taught us that with the Holy Spirit we can move mountains." Clouds don't keep their shapes very long. It doesn't take long for the wind to blow a little and then they just kind of lose their shape. But she seems to be so amazed. I'm sure she knows that, and he does too. So maybe it just poofed real quickly, disappeared. But it could have been the wind. But how did he, I don't know. The timing of it is what blew her mind, I think. This would be only one of many times I would see that Elvis had extraordinary powers. The disappearance of that poodle-shaped cloud truly impressed me, and I've never forgotten the incident. There is no end to the things this man knows or can do, I thought to myself, and as the years went on, I saw other signs of his ability to meditate and use the power of prayer. Elvis had been ill and seemed to be having some health problems. He suffered from hypertension, which, in his case, was not a nervous disorder, but rather a life-threatening clinical disease. In addition, he had inherited a weak heart, an unfortunate family trait. His blood pressure was very high, and everyone was concerned about the possibility of a heart attack. This is in 1970, 7 years before he passed. So he had been ill. Maybe after he got back from that tour. Later, when we were in bed, I was deeply concerned about his health and asked him about it. He pulled out a PDR, Physician's Desk Reference Manual, sat down on the bed and began reading aloud about some of the new medication his physician had recently prescribed for his problems. "Kathy, I've got a cancer-like condition on top of this other heart thing." I was stunned. I couldn't hold back my tears. He tried to reassure me. "Don't worry, honey. Dr. Nick knows what's in my system. He's taking care of everything." He wanted me to know the truth, and yet he didn't want to make a big issue out of it. He was very gallant, but deep in his eyes I could see he was wrestling with a bigger problem. "How much longer do I have?" "Oh, He was wrestling with a bigger problem. How much longer do I have? We both fell silent, pondering the seriousness of our conversation for what seemed like a long time. So what in the world is this cancer-like condition on top of this heart thing that he's talking about? Something that doesn't go away. It spreads. Could be the intestinal problem that he has. Could be getting started. We were still sitting in bed. Elvis's arm was around me, and the other hand was holding the book he had read aloud. Suddenly he looked down and said, "You have the most beautiful feet I have ever seen." His remark surprised me, and I was a little relieved that the subject had changed abruptly. "Do you think so? I've always loved my feet, and I really try to take care of them." "I love beautiful feet," he said, "and I think yours are just gorgeous." "Feet are important to me, too," I told him, and yours are just as perfect as you are." Elvis moved his feet closer and said, "I have twin toes, see? The second and third toes are the same length. They're identical. Lots of twins have this feature." So the second and third toe were the same height. Lots of twins have this feature. Interesting. Then Elvis laughed. "I remember a girl once, and we were getting along real well. We were on the bed, and she took off her shoes and stockings, and her feet were just plain ugly. It turned me off so much, I just got up and left. I'll bet she never knew what happened to me," he said with another fit of laughter. "You didn't? That's terrible." I usually didn't like for Elvis to tell me stories of other women. I guess no woman does. But this was so funny, and he enjoyed telling it so much that I had to join into the laughter too. Besides, I was really in a great mood now that he told me I had beautiful feet. Elvis put the book down and kissed me. As usual, his kisses aroused me, but this time I didn't try to pull away. I kissed him back and held on to him, and then as I ran my hands over his shoulders, his skin so unbelievably smooth, there was a sense of urgency within myself I had never known before. We both knew, without saying a word, that this was the right time and the right place, that I was ready to give all of myself to him without question or reservation. He was tender, sweet, so gentle, so understanding. We entered a place where there was no time, no sound, except the loving, passionate words in my ear, and the world seemed a distant place as Elvis took me to a special land I never knew before, where there were no feelings of guilt, no self-recrimination, only love, peace, and the warmth of our bodies breathing as one. I loved Elvis with all my heart, and nothing could make what we had done together an evil thing. It was beautiful, wonderful, and for the first time in my life, I felt complete, as if I had always been waiting for him to make love to me. I couldn't sleep, and as the purple light crept over Mount San Jacinto, I got up quietly and went outside and stood on Elvis's private patio. Chilled by the early morning air, I stood there watching the mountain change from purples to pink as the sun came up. The massive beauty of that moment made me feel my insignificance, and I tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come, and tears blurred my eyes. I found my true love, I thought, but have I lost my God? How could I feel this powerful a love and be expected to deny it, this opening up of my heart? Then I began to shiver and went inside to find the warm comfort of Elvis's arms. He's in there sleeping, because they probably went to bed at like 4 a.m. She couldn't go to sleep, so she got up. The sun's rising. And she went back and got back in bed. He was probably asleep. That afternoon, the bodyguards were having margaritas, a rather lethal drink made with tequila. And in a completely turnaround for me, I said yes when they offered me one. Elvis never drank, but didn't object to his bodyguards drinking if they kept it under control. However, one margarita called for a second one, and I was feeling pretty tipsy. I knew how Elvis hated to see anyone drunk, but especially women, and maybe this was sort of a rebellion for me. I still don't know why I did it, but Elvis thought it was kind of cute and funny, and this time, instead of anger, he laughed and teased me. I guess I was feeling that if I had already gone to hell, I might as well go all the way. But thank heaven, this was only a temporary emotional binge and was not the beginning of a new behavior pattern. That night, we did discuss something that had been in the back of my mind, but I didn't want to think about it. Elvis held me close, and we were in bed. "Kathy, do you know anything about birth control?" He sounded very serious. "A little, just what I've heard, but not much." "Well, honey, you ought to get the pill or something. We wouldn't want you to get pregnant." I pulled away from him, suddenly frightened. "I don't want to get pregnant either. What about the pill?" "I think you should talk to a doctor about that. It's important." A wave of dread came over me. What would I ever say to my parents? How could I ever face my friends if I got pregnant? I was filled with fear. I will, I said in a tone that made him laugh. "Honey, don't get all worked up now. I just want you to do it soon, that's all," he said as he pulled me back into his arms. I leaned my head on his chest and shuddered at the possibility. Then I heard Elvis chuckling, and he broke into a laugh. "What's so funny?" I couldn't find any humor in this conversation. "I was just thinking," he said between chuckles, "how tiny you are and how funny you would look all puffed out, big with child and singing a duet with me on stage." Now, I tried to picture it too. I began to chuckle myself, and soon we were both laughing, and I held my nightgown way out and puffed up my cheeks and pretended I was on stage giving a performance. With that, Elvis laughed even harder, and soon he was saying, "Oh, Kathy, I love you. I really do, little one." He loved it when people made him laugh, especially the girls. Gene made him laugh so much, and he loved Gene. It was very difficult parting. It was very difficult parting after 3 days of being with him, but I had to go. I had signed contracts, had commitments to perform, and there was no choice. "You don't have to go to work, Minnie Mouse. I'll always take care of you." "I want to work. That's a big part of my life. I couldn't give that up." Remember him telling Lucy that? "You don't need to work. I'll take care of you." He wants to find out if someone's willing to give up their job for him. And that way they're available when he is not working. But, if they have a job, when he's not working, they're having to go to work. So he wants them to not have to work. "I want to work. That's a big part of my life. I couldn't give that up." "Just cancel out. You don't have to worry about money or anything," he pleaded. "Now look," my voice was sharp, "you are in the same business, and if I canceled out on you, it would really be a hardship if you were counting on me to perform. These people are counting on me, and I can't let them down." He stopped arguing then. "When will you be free?" "As soon as my jobs are over. I promise. I will definitely be free next weekend." "Promise?" I promised, and of course I was. Since I had returned from Elvis's tour, I had been extremely busy. Once back in Los Angeles, I was running from place to place, taping TV shows, taking care of my personal business and my animals. But this return home from Palm Springs was much different. I was walking on air, moving from singing date to singing date with remarkable energy. I was laughing more, joking more, and to any keen observer, it was obvious that Kathy Westmoreland was head over heels in love. But as the week wore on, the seeds of doubt in back of my mind grew. What was I doing? Elvis was married, and even if he wasn't married, he was just not husband material. By his own admission, he could not remain faithful to one person. "I'm just not the type of man to sit home and watch TV," he told me one night. Elvis was not nearly as promiscuous as some of the tabloids try to make him out to be, because he was very discerning about relationships. He had to trust the woman he was with, had to care for her, and all of that took time and patience. He had plenty of opportunities because women flocked around him like ants to chocolate cake at a picnic. However, Elvis was careful, discreet in public, and most of the groupies did not interest him. That's what I've been saying all along. I knew all this, but still, I missed him terribly. As the week wore on, I felt more and more incomplete, and in spite of all my dark thoughts, I couldn't wait for Elvis's plane to pick me up and take me to Palm Springs again. At last, the weekend rolled around, and once again, without planning it, we found ourselves dressed in the same colors. Elvis was dressed in a black leather outfit. He liked the fact that I was dressed in black too, and commented on it. "You look good in black, sweetheart. I really like you in it." He also showed me his latest pair of sunglasses, which matched his outfit. Later, he whipped out a giant suitcase and threw it onto the bathroom counter. "My God," I exclaimed as he excitedly unclasped the case, spilling sunglasses by the dozens and sending them crashing and flying across the tile floor. Oops. "I don't know if I told you, Kathy, but I've got glaucoma now, and my eyes are real sensitive to light. I've got to wear dark glasses." He was diagnosed with that, I think, in '69. He was in Nashville recording some music, and his eyes were starting to hurt. And then, like the next day, they were in such pain he had to stop the recording. And they called in. He called Dr. Nick, but Dr. Nick called in a ophthalmologist to come and check on him, and they had to give him shots in his eyes. Whew. I think he called Sheila Ryan or Barbara Lee to come be with him. Or maybe that girl from Washington, D.C., because Priscilla was in California. But he could have called her, but he did not. "I don't know if I told you, Kathy, but I've got glaucoma now, and my eyes are real sensitive to light. I've got to wear dark glasses almost all the time. I'd never seen so many glasses in my life. They were his favorite frames, the silver or gold ones with the TCB emblem, and the tints included every possible shade within the spectrum of the rainbow. If I have to wear the damn things," Elvis smiled, making fun of himself, "I'm going to have one in every color." That weekend started out on a high note. I didn't intend that to be a pun, but Charlie Hodge and I had the funniest argument about whether one note he was playing on the piano was a high C or a double high C. Elvis listened to us and just kept laughing and laughing. "Oh, quit arguing, you two." It was then that Charlie and I realized how intense we had become over something so unimportant, and we joined in the laughter too. Then, that afternoon, Elvis told me a humorous but sad story that touched my heart. When he was making movies in Hollywood, he made 33 films and disliked almost all of them. He bought a house in Beverly Hills. It was roomy enough, but wasn't too bad a commute to the studios. Besides, Beverly Hills offers more police security than any other city in the world, and most celebrities felt safe there. Elvis loved animals, and he missed his pets he had to leave behind at Graceland, so he got himself a pet chimpanzee that he named Scatter. I love Scatter. He was so affectionate and so smart, Elvis told me, and I could see his eyes light up with the memory. I used to dress him up in a tux and send my little limo after him and bring him to the studio. I loved seeing him in that limo all dressed up, holding a cigar. The cigar was never lit, but it did add a lot to the role Scatter was playing, and I think he knew it. Well, Scatter was one of the best buddies I had around at the time. He would hug me, and we would have long conversations about this and that. Scatter seemed to understand what I said to him, Elvis recalled with a smile. Aw, he was a buddy. But one day, Scatter got a little frisky, Elvis said, and somebody at the house left the door ajar. Scatter was a curious guy, so he decided to take a walk. Next door, there was a lot of laughter and people talking, and Scatter knew he had stumbled onto a party, so he decided to go. The front door of the neighbor's house must have been unlocked because Scatter just walked right in. The hostess was pregnant at the time, which might account for her reaction, but all these Beverly Hills types were sitting around the dining room table having dinner. All of a sudden, Scatter decided to join them and jumped right up on the chandelier and started swinging back and forth. The hostess nearly fainted from fright, and the guests started screaming and scared poor Scatter half to death. But by this time, he was missed at home and one of the bodyguards came to his rescue. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious, I laughed, loving the way Elvis was telling the story. Then what happened? Well, then it got kind of serious. The folks filed a lawsuit, and besides they complained to the city of Beverly Hills, which is real stuffy about animals, and before you know it, the city told me Scatter had to go. Oh no, how could they do that? I have been an animal lover all my life, and by that time, I was seething at the entire city of Beverly Hills. I didn't know what to do. I loved that little fella so much, but I had no choice, and I shipped him home. I shipped him off to Graceland, where I knew everyone would make sure he was taken care of, Elvis said sadly. At least you had a place to send him. You didn't have to give him away to strangers. I wouldn't have said a word if I had known that then the outcome of the story. Scatter didn't quite see it that way. They always told me that chimps really love somebody forever, and I guess it's true. Scatter refused to eat, just sat around and mourned because he missed me so much. And then Daddy called me from Graceland and told me Scatter had just died of a broken heart. There were tears in Elvis's eyes. That's awful and so sad, was all I could think of to say. So I just moved out of Beverly Hills, sold the house, and never went back. And I made sure everybody knew just what I thought of that place. I think that's the house on Hillcrest that I love so much. He didn't like Beverly Hills after that. No wonder he moved out. Elvis struck back in the only way he knew how. But his voice told me he still felt the pain of losing Scatter. That story endeared him to me more than ever. Elvis was especially excited about a speech he had made to the National JC Convention in Memphis, where he had been named one of the country's 10 most outstanding young men. He stood on a footstool and with gestures repeated his speech. I won't forget the song he quoted in closing. Without a song, the day would never end. Without a song, the road would never bend. Without a song, a man ain't got a friend. Without a song. And then he finished his speech by saying, so I'll just keep on singing the song. He was so proud of being named by the JCs and had picked up several programs which he gave out to special friends. I still have mine. But that night, in the quiet stillness of each other's arms, after a flurry of passion, things began to go topsy-turvy. I think of the words we said to one another, and to this day I regret what happened. Looking back, I can see that the whole idea of being in love with a married man affected me more deeply than I had imagined. I would be ecstatic when he held me, responsive to his lovemaking, and totally, madly, wildly in love. And then I would go into a deep depression, feeling guilty, sinful, unworthy, and suffered inwardly because I could find no valid excuse for committing adultery, love or no love. My moods would swing up and down, back and forth. Elvis took the brunt of all my pent-up feelings this night. Out of nowhere, I said, we have to stop all this because I can't stand myself anymore. I really can't excuse my behavior, having sex with a married man, when I know it isn't going anywhere, and it doesn't mean as much to you as it does to me. Elvis was surprised at my sudden pronouncement. Sweetheart, what's this? I'm through. No more. It's over, I said, bouncing out of bed, and I began to pace back and forth. Does that mean I have to get someone else? Train them just like I want them? That doesn't sound good coming out, does it? Does that mean I have to get someone else so I can train them the way I want them? She ain't gonna like what that she said. All caps. What did you say? I couldn't believe my ears. Am I some kind of dog or puppy that you housebreak, trained to be a good pet? I'm a woman, a human being, and I hate you for saying that to me. You will just have to find yourself another Gladys. Oops, oh my gosh. Elvis had never seen me so angry. I don't think I had ever been so angry and upset in my life. I kept raving and ranting. He sat in bed, legs crossed, lips tight with silent anger, and stared straight ahead. Suddenly, when I had quieted down, he said in a hurt voice, almost a whisper, "My mother's name was Gladys." "Oh, Elvis, I didn't know. I didn't know. I've always used that name when I make a point, like get another Gladys. Believe me, it had nothing to do with your mother." He sat up in bed, studying my face for a long, silent period, trying to figure out if I was telling the truth. I think that's cool about him. He's not afraid to stare at someone in the face to try to read their face. A lot of times I look away, but I think that's really cool that he will do that. I've heard other people talk about that, how he'll study the face to read it, to see if it's telling the truth or not. He sat up in bed, studying my face for a long, silent period, trying to figure out if I was telling the truth. Elvis loved his mother, but he had never referred to her by name before, or if he had, I had forgotten. However, I knew I had touched something raw and painful. I was sick about the way I hurt him. "I really didn't know your mother's name. I would never have said that if I had known. It's important that you believe me. But you hurt me so much, too, saying you were training me like some dumb animal just to give you pleasure." Elvis got up and pulled me to him. "Sweetheart, I didn't mean it like it sounded. It's hard for me to find someone who can get used to the way I live, my routine. Please don't act this way." And that's what he meant. He didn't mean train them into being the way he wanted them to please him. It was training them, getting them used to his life, his lifestyle, living at night, being stuck in hotel rooms, riding on planes. It's fast-paced life, fast going, but mostly the living at night, your topsy-turvy life. You can't go shopping. You have to, rent places at night. But she hadn't done any of that yet, but that's what he's talking about. Training wasn't the right word to use. It's more of like having them adjust to his lifestyle. That's what he meant. He said, "It's hard for me to find someone who can get used to the way I live, my routine. Please don't act this way." After a long while, I was appeased, and we apologized to one another over and over. But after that argument, there was just a slight difference in Elvis's attitude toward me. I couldn't define it, but it was there. I wanted to bite my tongue off for being so emotional. After all, I walked into our relationship with my eyes wide open. Elvis never hid anything from me. I knew he was married. He had told me often enough what he thought of marriage, and had even told me several times that he could not be faithful to one woman. So what was wrong with me? Why couldn't I just accept him the way he was, not try to change him, because he couldn't be changed? I knew that. Why the frustration? But like it or not, we had both crossed some invisible but forbidden boundary, entered a land that was strange to me. On the surface, everything seemed the same. Elvis sang, I sang, we talked, we laughed, took swims, and drove with the guys in the dune buggies. But there was a tension that hadn't been present before. Nothing I could put my finger on, like flickering shadows in the night. It was as if both of us were in mourning, but we didn't know who had died. Oh, gosh. It's not going to work out. I get what she's saying, though, as a Christian, and she's like, what'd she say, around 30? So she's had these thoughts all her life, of saving herself for marriage, and she had such an idea of infidelity and having an affair with a married man, adultery, that she couldn't get over that because of feeling guilty of how God was looking at her. And it's overwhelming. I totally understand that. I was sad when I left Palm Springs that next day. Elvis pretended it was just like always, but I knew I had stepped on some sacred ground, that I had behaved impulsively, and he didn't like my attitude, especially since he had been honest from the beginning. I went back to work feeling very low. I had 5 more shows to do with Bobby Darin, and I had to get through them somehow. But then Tom Diskin called and said we were going on tour, which would begin in Oakland, move to Portland, Oregon, Seattle, San Francisco, one day in Los Angeles, and then San Diego, ending up in Oklahoma City, and we would all be back home by Thanksgiving. I canceled out on Bobby Darin and left on the tour with Elvis. It was not a very nice thing to do to my contractor, but when you are in love, you do some very unthoughtful things to some really nice people. For some reason, it felt good to be on the road again this time. I loved waking up in a different city each day, and I was crazy about flying then. On this flight, we used Conrad Hilton's personal plane, a G2 jet, which seemed to take off more like a rocket than a plane, and Elvis loved it. He kept talking about the plane and how he relished going to great speeds. We were sitting together in the back of the G2, and I can still see Elvis in his black cape, leaning back in his seat during takeoff and making faces as if he could feel the racing wind on his face. It was really comical to watch him. Oh, gosh. His black cape. Elvis had a new look on this trip. He traveled with the cape and cane. This is when he started the cane time period. The cape and the cane. I remember one cane because it was so beautiful. It had a lion's head that served as the cane handle, and the lion was made of gold with precious stones. I've seen that in pictures. I think he uses that. They did a family portrait with him and Priscilla and Lisa. I think they did that in Los Angeles at their house there, and he had the cane. He was wearing blue. There's overwhelming blue in that picture, but I think he has the cane. It had a lion's head that served as the cane handle, and the lion was made of gold with precious stones. I don't know if he had it designed or found it somewhere, but it was smashing. Touring by plane also just seemed to add to the excitement of going to a different place. I seemed to thrive on the road tours in those days. Don't ask me why, because when you do one-night shows and move from city to city, you have no idea where you are most of the time. Oakland looks like Portland, and Portland looks like Glendale. It's all the same, yet different. The Elvis audiences were as rambunctious as ever, and the screaming fans were just as loud, but this time it wasn't such a shock. Maybe, I mused, I'm getting used to being crazy. Another memory that stands out for me on the way to Portland was when we both saw a double rainbow. Elvis and I held hands and watched those brilliant colors, and knew just seeing such a spectacular sight meant we were destined to have good luck. After Portland, we went on to Seattle, and Elvis was in an exuberant mood. I recall his standing up in the plane to get everyone's attention. He had a paper in his hand. Look, everybody, my record sales have just hit a total of 300 million. The Beatles have sold 60 million records. At this writing, Elvis records have sold more than 2 billion copies. And that's when she wrote this book in the late 1980s. 2 billion. So in 1970, it was 300 million. No one will ever catch up with me now. We all rejoiced at the news. After Seattle, we headed for beautiful, romantic San Francisco. But that trip to San Francisco will always remain in my memory like a hot brand searing into my brain and my heart. The trip had been fun, romantic, and never predictable, because working with Elvis brought fresh excitement every day and for every performance. I stayed with Elvis in his suite each night, but I always had a room assigned to me, which was nice because I felt I always had a place to be alone if I wanted to be. However, it was an extravagance because I seldom, if ever, used the room. We were in the hotel, and I was fascinated with the view of the most romantic city in the world, and I was anxious for the show to be over so I could be alone with Elvis. Loving him and being with him every day and every night had been the greatest experience of my life, and I wanted to talk to him about how much it had meant to me. Then, just before the show, Elvis pulled me to him and then held my face so he was looking right into my eyes. "It's time, Minnie Mouse. It's time," was all he said. But it was the way he looked at me that told me it was serious. "Time for what?" I didn't get his meaning. "Time for you to go to your own room." With that, he let go of me and turned away. "Why? Why?" I heard myself saying, but there was nobody around to give me an answer. I was stunned. If Elvis didn't want me with him that night, and there was no relative or Priscilla wasn't in town, then there could only be one answer: another woman. "That has to be why he wants me to go to my own room. I just know it," I said to myself, and of course it was true. How can I describe the hurt? I had difficulty breathing or even swallowing. I wanted to run away, but my feet were glued to the floor. I couldn't move. Then there were flashes of anger and hate. Racked my body in hot waves. What did I do? What did I say? Why can't I be enough for him? How have I failed him? I began pacing back and forth, hardly aware of what I was doing or where I was. Then I started blaming myself. Palm Springs. Remember the fight you had with him because he made that remark about having to train someone else? How angry you were, and saying he should get another Gladys? How hurt he looked? How different he was in the morning? A subtle difference, but it was there. It was my fault. Elvis hated possessiveness. He had to feel free. Was he training someone else? Whose heart is he breaking now? What girl is he laughing with, kissing? Is she tall, blonde, and beautiful? How can I compete with the endless parade of beauty queens that throw themselves at his feet? Oh God, I can't stand the pain. This was the night I never wanted to remember again. This was the night that my entire world changed and my dreams turned sour and ugly. This was the night I saw another side of Elvis I thought I would never be able to accept. I didn't think I would be able to go on with the tour. There was Los Angeles coming up, then San Diego, and Oklahoma City. How could I be with him on stage, singing and moving with the music? How could I be civil to him, even perform when I felt choked with hurt and resentment? Well, we do a lot of things we don't think we can do. Show business is a great mender of broken hearts because there is no choice. You do go on. You do sing. You do pack and move and pack and move, and you always do perform. And you do that even when the man you love has found somebody else. Yeah, he didn't want... He knew it was tearing her up inside. And so he's like, for her and for him. And she said that. Oh, she hit a raw spot. But she said her piece. How much more have I got here? Because this is going on and on and on and on and on. I think I'm going to have to stop. Chapter 4 is on page 84, and I'm on page 74. I guess I need to keep going, but how can I leave y'all hanging? What's she going to do about singing? She's got to go on stage with him in San Francisco and then in Los Angeles. So let me take a quick break. The dogs are jumping on the swing. Well, maybe they're jumping off. Okay. From San Francisco, it was on to Los Angeles and the Forum, where the crowds got out of hand. What I remember most about this appearance is that we did 2 shows, and each one had a sellout crowd of 20,000, and there had only been 10 minutes of radio time advertising the events. Amazing. 40,000 people. That's when Elvis said, "When I decided on doing road tours, it was because I was tired of making movies and wanted to work in front of a live audience again. I thought at the time the tours would end up costing me money, but I wanted to do them anyway. That day, we did a matinee and then an evening performance. As we were leaving for our hotel in the bus," because now she's riding the bus with the singers and the tour band, the band. They're all like, "Hey, so it's over between the two of y'all." As we were leaving for our hotel in the bus, a group, which seemed like thousands to those of us inside, began rocking the bus back and forth like it was a toy. The police finally broke it up, but it was a harrowing experience. We really thought we were going to tip it over. We really thought they were going to tip it over, and we didn't know if we should get off the bus and take our chances with that wild crowd, or stay aboard and possibly be injured if the bus went over on its side. I shudder to think of what might have happened if the police hadn't arrived when they did. By the time we left Los Angeles, I had recovered from my initial shock, enough to put the entire San Francisco nightmare into some kind of perspective. Time heals, doesn't it? When Elvis told me it was time to go to my own room, I was numb with grief, and I couldn't justify his behavior, or mine either, for that matter. However, I had decided that since we had to be together and work together on this tour, I was going to make the most of it and just wait until I got back home to sort out all of my confused thoughts. That's smart. Probably God put that idea in your head. But I knew there had been some permanent damage to our relationship. I just didn't know how permanent, or even what either one of us wanted to salvage from the experience. So when we got to San Diego, Elvis wanted me to sleep in his room that night, and I did. But there was a difference, an invisible curtain that hadn't been there before. Perhaps it was my invisible curtain, and I was the only one aware of it, but at least I didn't feel quite so vulnerable and helpless. However, when I allowed myself to think about it, the enormity of my pain would engulf me in great waves, as if I were drowning in an ocean of helpless despair. So Elvis wanted her to be in his room that night. So when he was in San Francisco, he had another girl. And then when he went to Los Angeles, they had 2 shows. What did he say? Okay, so they were only in Los Angeles one night because they did a matinee and an evening performance. When we got to San Diego, so that was 2 nights, San Francisco and Los Angeles. So he may have had someone flown in from somewhere. I don't really know who that was. I have to research and find out. But it's the little girlfriends that only lasted like 2 weeks or 3 weeks or here and there, got flown in from Atlanta, or maybe he knew someone in San Francisco or Washington, D.C. I don't know. I know there was a girl in Washington, D.C. that he met, I think in 1969, and he dated her for I think 2 years. But sometimes she couldn't come when he called, so eventually he stopped calling her. But I don't know if she flew out to San Francisco. She may have. He's like, "Hey, Joe, call Joyce and see if she can fly out here and be with me for a couple nights." But she would always go back to work. You know, she never really took a lot of time off work. So she probably left, and now he's like, "I need someone in the bed with me so I can hold on to them." Because remember, that's what he liked. He liked someone in the bed with him. He could hold on to him. Elvis was in an exuberant mood in San Diego, singing "It's Now or Never" in the shower and feeling very playful. It's now or never. La da da da, la da 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 da. That would be so cool to hear. I would love to hear that. Hear him singing in the shower. Soon he glided effortlessly into beautiful Italian lyrics. Wow. After he dried off and walked back into the bedroom, I told him, I was very impressed with your vocal range when you first came out with that record. He smiled and said, and that was in 1961. We're talking 1970 now, late 1970. He smiled and said, you know how that song came about? One time when I was in the service, I was singing O Sole Mio, and I turned to the guys and said, and here he gestured with his hand pointed up in the air. And I told him, I said, tell him to write me some new lyrics to that song in English. But he doesn't go all the way back to the original O Sole Mio when he was with June, and they heard that, and he was singing it on the radio with June, and that's when she turned to him in the car and said, wow, your voice is so powerful. This was in 1956. She said, your voice is so powerful, you should let people hear that. And he said, well, maybe I'll record that one day. June's influence. But then when he was in the service, that's what happened, because he had it in the back of his mind. So he's been sleeping on it and thinking about it when he could laying in bed and thinking about songs. He's probably thinking, oh, Sole Mio, I want to sing that song. June said my voice sounds really good singing that. It's very powerful. So that's what happened. Tell him to write me some new lyrics to that song in English. Even though, and who did he tell that to? Charlie Hodge, probably. He said he gestured to the guys, but Charlie Hodge, I'm sure, was one of the guys. Even though we were having a wonderful time, but he had learned a lot of the lyrics in Italian. And on one of his CDs somewhere, he does sing the Italian lyrics. I have heard it. You can look it up. Look up on Apple Music or Amazon Music, Elvis, Now or Never, Italian lyrics. Or maybe O Sole Mio. Even though we were having a wonderful time in San Diego, by the second afternoon, so they're in San Diego 2 nights, I guess, I think I needed to be alone to try and think things through and sort out my feelings. Oh, gosh, Kathy, bless your heart. He understood, and the next day, I was in better spirits. So she spent one night with him in San Diego, but the second night she spent in her own room. And he understood. And the next day, I was in better spirits as I joined him in his plane, and we headed for the next stop, Oklahoma. In Oklahoma City, Elvis' suite was done in black and white and was really very stark looking, even though the room was filled with flowers and fruit baskets, his usual hotel welcome. Elvis hated the decor, so he had an inspiration and turned to someone and said, go out and get me all red light bulbs for this place. Go out and get me all red light bulbs. When the red bulbs arrived, he had them put into every light fixture, including the bed lamps, which gave the place a dark but warming feeling. He was pretty proud of his instant interior decorating. That is very interesting. And it's funny because a lot of the baby lights that you get these days for infants, newborns, have different light settings. And the red one is the one at night that you use. And I forget why you use red at night, but I think number one, you can see with the red light, but also I think it has something to do with it's easier for the babies to go to sleep. You know, if you got to have a light on or something. So, something about that. So anyway, isn't that interesting? He goes in there and I want red. Red was a real big color scheme in the 70s. You know, you get cars that had red interiors, a big old black. His black Stutz had a red interior. And I remember having cars. You'd see cars in movies, they'd have red interior. So red was just a big color. And he ended up having his house redone in 1974. And the downstairs had a lot of reds in it, which he ended up not liking as much. He thought he would like it, but then Linda did it, and he even called. My living room looks like a Bordeaux because of the type of furniture that she put in there. But it had red. But I heard that he started going in the back door all the time and going up the back steps through the kitchen and upstairs, so he didn't have to look at the red living room. And when you look to the left, to the dining room, it was red too. So it was just red everywhere. It had red curtains. They put curtains on there. It was a lot of red. So anyway, red bulbs. That's cool. Elvis's suite overlooked the auditorium entrance. So the suite was attached to the auditorium, apparently. Or maybe the hotel was next to it, but you could look out. Maybe it was looking outside at the auditorium entrance, where people would line up, I guess. And we sat in front of the picture window, watching the people lined up far below, moving slowly toward the ticket window. That's what it is. Whether it was attached to the building, it could have been across the street, but it looked out over to the front of the entrance, and he could watch the people buying their tickets. Elvis was relaxing in an armchair. At least he was about as relaxed as he ever got, with all of his fingers jiggling. And remember June talking about that? And one leg crossed over the other, foot wiggling nervously. He did that all the time. You look at pictures of him, his legs crossed, his foot's probably just dangling. And I've seen him dangle that foot before, and like he's getting interviews and stuff, he's just dangling that foot. Wiggle, 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 like that. That's what he would do. Ava, that feels so good. He watched them for a while, then slowly observed out loud. People will come from miles around just to see a freak, which made everybody laugh. He called himself a freak. I'm a freak. He thinks he's a squirrel. He told all the people in Las Vegas he was a squirrel. He was crazy. But Elvis laughed louder than anyone. People would drive miles around just to watch a freak. There was Vernon, Elvis's father, Charlie, and myself relaxing and talking before the show. So Charlie's always with him. So Elvis's dad, Charlie, Kathy, and Elvis in the room. Somehow, we got on the subject of our early church-going days. As a young child, I had visited the Nazarene church with some of my relatives, and Elvis was a member of the Assembly of God church. And both churches encouraged testifying whenever the mood struck a believer. I told him how frightened I was as a child singing in the front of the church, and all these grown-up people waving handkerchiefs, jumping up and down, testifying about their sins, and asking for God's forgiveness. I mentioned one aunt who was slightly retarded and would jump up saying, "I want to testify, I want to testify." Then she would softly say, "Be good today," and sit down. It was touchy and funny. Elvis said that the testifying at his church had really terrified Priscilla. You know, she's Catholic and they're reserved. She's used to a much different atmosphere in her church, and I respect that, he explained. But when she saw all this going on, people jumping up and testifying and shouting, it really disturbed her, so she was never comfortable in my church. Elvis had a special relationship with his grandmother, who he called Dodger. Once, when he and the guys were staging one of their firecracker wars on the grounds at Graceland, he started throwing them at the house, aiming for Dodger's window. All in the spirit of fun, of course. She adored the prankster in Elvis, and I think he even inherited this rascal quality from her. While in Oklahoma City, Elvis was lying on his bed and suddenly jumped up and started dialing the telephone. "I gotta call my grandma," he said. After he was connected to Graceland and was talking to Dodger, he found out that she was ill. "See," he said in his very best baby talk, "don't I always know when to call my Dodger? Don't I always know when she's sick?" His voice was so tender and loving, it stirred me emotionally. Isn't that crazy? That's what happened. Like when his mama died, that's what happened to his mama when he was in that plane wreck that Gene talks about. Not plane wreck, but the plane almost crashed. His mama knew it. She sat straight up. And, things like that happened with his family where they would just sit straight up and they just knew to call. So what did she say? We were in Oklahoma City and Elvis was lying on his bed and suddenly jumped up and started dialing the telephone. He was lying on the bed. I gotta call my grandma. See, and his best baby talk. See, don't I always know when to call my Dodger? Don't I always know when she's sick? Baby talk. His voice was so tender and loving it stirred me emotionally. But no matter how confused I was about our relationship and what was expected of me, I still enjoyed being around him and being with him. He was always so charged up, so unpredictable. He kept things moving and changing. Elvis was really a very exciting man. Definitely a fire and maybe a wind. Then the tour was over and I went back to Los Angeles. Elvis headed for Graceland, where he was always tried to spend the holidays. Going to Graceland. It's like, Scylla, bring Lisa and come on home. Come back to Graceland. We're going to spend Thanksgiving and Christmas there. It was a lonely Thanksgiving and Christmas. I had my family, and I was grateful for each and every one of them. But they never mentioned Elvis to me, and I didn't really want to discuss Elvis with them. So an important part of my life was closed off, and total loneliness set in. At one long recording session in Los Angeles, I had an extended wait, and out of desperation to get some of the heavy burden off my chest, I confided in a singer who was also a good friend. She listened seriously for a moment. And then her eyes lit up. Wow, she groaned. Kathy, if you were going to lose your virginity, I can't think of a better man to do it with. She couldn't get over how lucky I was. I know she didn't mean to do it, but she didn't take my dilemma as seriously as I did, and it was much too early in the romance to make light of what was a very heavy burden for me. I was busy, but the days were like a jail sentence. In the past, I had always looked forward to the holidays, Christmas, New Year's, and the get-togethers, the long lunches, exchanging of gifts, and church. But church seemed to be the only place where I felt peace. My other real consolation was working. During this season, I got a chance to sing in a good classical style vocally. Did some oratorios and special choral music like the Messiah. Music has always been my love, and singing some of the world's greatest sacred music helped me through some of the worst times. On the days when I wasn't working, I was restless, on edge most of the time, and approached all the traditional things with a well-hidden, I hope, sense of boredom. So she hoped she was hiding her sense of boredom so other people didn't see it in her. Somehow the days passed, and it was time to go to Las Vegas for rehearsals. This will be the first time I had ever rehearsed with Elvis. When I had walked into the show the previous August, 1970, it was already underway, so I simply adjusted as best I could. I was looking forward to the rehearsal because I had heard that an Elvis Presley rehearsal was never dull. I was right. It wasn't. We had all gathered in the rehearsal room, and suddenly Elvis appeared like a shining light on a gloomy day. There it is, coming in with God's light and glory all over him. Once again, I noted that Elvis never entered a room like most people. He swept in and took over as usual because his natural magnetism affected men and women alike. What started out to be an ordinary gathering turned into a real happening when Elvis appeared on the scene. First, he had on the most beautiful cape made of suede with fringe in bright primary colors. Oh, I know that Oh, I love that jacket. Oh my gosh, I've seen pictures of him in that jacket. It is so cool. Yes, the suede is brown, and then all the fringe hangs down in different primary colors. It was so stunning that we all commented on it, and he was very proud. Priscilla designed it and then had it made for me, he beamed. She must have given it to him for Christmas. Elvis liked clothes, and he would really glow when everyone approved his taste. I must admit that on some men, much of his wardrobe would look strange or out of place, but on Elvis, it usually was smashing and seemed just right for him. Entering rehearsal, he had that cat that ate the canary look, and I knew something was up. He was followed by bodyguards who were carrying oversized briefcases filled with silver dollars. He walked over to me and dumped some of them in my lap. I was flabbergasted and wasn't sure what to say. Then he started giving them to the 10 or 12 people in the room. He was so pleased that he had surprised us, and he started joking, and then, for no reason, we all began throwing the silver dollars at one another, and the room became a mass of flying silver dollars coming from every direction. Wow. Right after that, a new game started when we all scrambled around on our hands and knees trying to retrieve the money, competing with one another as to how many we could collect. To top off this strange beginning to a rehearsal, Elvis gave each of the girls, the Sweets and myself, a gold evening bag filled with more Eisenhower silver dollars. How nice. And I'm sure he just laid in bed one night and was thinking about it and just like, what can I do for my girls? I got it. He got this idea. I'm going to get them a gold purse, and I'm going to take some of these silver dollars and fill it up. Inside my evening bag, he had written with a felt pen, "I love you, darling, EP." Wow. Wow. What excitement that there was no one there as excited and as pleased as Elvis. It was quite a momentous occasion for the beginning of a new Las Vegas show, and one I'm certain that none of us will ever forget. Inside her bag, he wrote, "I love you, darling, EP." It should have been awkward. With anyone else, it would have been awkward. Instead, our reunion was as if there never was an argument, and as if our parting had only been a few hours instead of weeks. He wanted me to stay in his penthouse suite that night, and of course, I did. Forgotten were all the resolutions, the hours of agony and recriminations, the determination to get out of the hopeless situation I was in. Instead, there was only the thought of being with him again, sitting in bed, reading, exchanging ideas, and then there was always the lovemaking that made me forget tomorrows, yesterdays, and his marital status. It made me forget that a married man never shares holidays, the lonely times, the sad times, and the times of crisis. Elvis just wiped all the pain from my heart and mind with one touch, one smile, and one of his kisses could make me forget there was such a thing as the future. I just enjoyed the time I had with him and expected no more. That's what you had to do with him. That's the attitude you had to have. But that is very hard. Elvis called me up to his suite and fastened a gold necklace on my neck. It read TLC, which stood for Tender Loving Care, over a lightning bolt and had a clasp. He had 4 other original TLC necklaces made for the suites as well, because there were 4 suites that year. Later on, there were only 3 suites. The guys wore TCB necklaces, taking care of business, which also bore the lightning bolt. Elvis told me the story about the origin of the insignia. One stormy night at Graceland, he was standing in front of a mirror in a fit of hot anger, seeing nothing but ugliness. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning struck a marble statue in the meditation garden, leaving his nameplate shattered and broken in a jagged pattern resembling the lightning bolt that had struck it. He interpreted it as a sign and a warning, as if God was putting him in his place. He ran back upstairs, looked in the mirror, and repeated to himself, "Remember who you are. Remember who you are." The lightning bolt insignia remained a symbol to him of his lesson that night. Wonder what made him mad. It was at Graceland. There were just so many funny and sad, and Priscilla's narrative is that she and he were on their airplane, and it was her idea for the design. But here Kathy is saying that she drew it out. Here Kathy's saying that he did it. It was his, all by himself. I don't see Priscilla's name in any of that story. There was just so many funny and sad things that happened over the years, and some of those I remember most, I will relate here. But they take place at different times and on different tours. So she's just relaying some of the stories. On one occasion in Elvis's suite, J.D. and the Stamps were gathered around the piano singing "Sweet, Sweet Spirit," while the other visitors were noisily chattering away. Elvis loves this song. He has them sing it during his tour. Elvis became irritated, jumped up on a stool, waved his arms, and hollered at everyone, "Shut up, G.D. They're singing about Jesus." A hush fell over the room, and all you could hear was the sound of the lilting spiritual. "Y'all should be quiet," he whispered. "They're singing about Jesus. Come on. Come on, man." Everyone was looking up sheepishly at Elvis, like he was Moses standing on Mount Sinai. His choice of words struck me as incongruously hilarious, but I did realize that in his own way, he was expressing his reverence for the Lord, and I admired him for this. It's like, shut up, G.D. They're singing about Jesus. Oh, my goodness. He does use that a lot. One funny incident I'll always remember took place in Lake Tahoe. Before a show, J.D., sound man Bill Porter — Bill had engineered earlier hits for Elvis, Roy Orbison, and the Everly Brothers — and I decided to pull a prank on Elvis. Later on stage, during Hawaiian Wedding Song, Elvis looked at me and sang, "I do." Then, when I smiled sweetly and opened my mouth to answer him back, it was J.D.'s deep voice that filled the air with, "I do." Elvis stepped back about 3 feet in shock, then walked off the stage in hysterics. The audience liked our little joke, too. Oh, that is too funny. He was inspecting her pretty little high voice. This incident happened when we were having breakfast with the bodyguards in the Vegas penthouse suite dining room. We had all had time off, and since we hadn't been together for a few weeks, like any family, we were doing a lot of catching up, especially telling one another about our holiday. The table conversation was a jumble with everyone talking at once. So we're at the last page. Evidently, Elvis wanted my attention, or more order. At first he hollered, "Listen to me, listen to me." Then he nudged me on the shoulder and said, "Listen to me." I continued my conversation with Charlie, who was at the end of the table. Getting nowhere, Elvis reached down, pulled out a small pistol he had been carrying in his boot, and took some shots at the ceiling. The guys at the table fell on the floor, seeking protection under the table, as pieces of plaster from the ceiling fell all over us. I don't know if it was numbness or if I was just used to Elvis's unpredictable behavior, but I just sat at the table and kept eating. Finally, the shooting stopped and the guys sheepishly poked their heads up over the height of the table. When I saw Red West staring at me, I simply said, "Red, will you pass me the toast?" Elvis began laughing, and then everyone joined in. "Our Kathy has nerves of steel. Nothing bothers Minnie Mouse." And then he reached over and hugged me. Nothing bothers Minnie Mouse? Nerves of steel? He had to be kidding. Whew, okay. Wow. So, that was a lot. She has some great memories and some good stories on Elvis. And again, we get to learn a little bit more about him when he's with her, and also his opinion of marriage. And he says it out loud to her that he can never be faithful to one woman. So this has been at the point where his dreams of having a family, which I don't think ever really went away because he would come back and talk to Lucy about it. But this was a time period when he just was living his life. And it was what it was. There were girls all the time. And so he's like, well, if this is what it's going to be, this is what it's going to be. But when he was with the girl, he was very respectful to them. And usually he was up front, so they knew that they were one of many. And so you had to accept that and just either want to be with him because he's a great guy. And a lot of girls lost their virginity with him. He loved when he found out that they were a virgin, that put them up a couple of more ranks on the ladder of importance, because he knew that person respected sex and wanted to have it with someone they loved or were waiting for marriage. So he would never push himself on them. He'd always say, I'm never going to push myself on you. So who knows how much longer he would have waited with Kathy. But as many women, eventually he woos them over, and that's what happens. So anyway, she struggled with it, and but I think she's finally coming to terms with it. So don't you think so too? All right. Well, I'm going to finish this. I'm sorry it's so long, but I was trying to get to the end of the chapter, and we did. We made it. All right. Talk to y'all later. Next time around. Bye.